I know you're like dying to see this on with the show, so I'm going to do just the briefest introduction and let Chef Romito go. But she was graduated first in her class from Schoolcraft Culinary, so amazing. I noticed that your first gig was the Golden Mushroom.
It was, yes.
20 years ago,
Yeah.
not necessarily today, but around that time, I had my going away party for the company that I worked for before this.
At the Golden Mushroom. I bet the food was amazing.
Yeah, it was.
It was an incredible place to learn.
Yeah.
It was scary, but it was cool.
Yeah, I like of course, the mushroom plate with all the different choices on that. So I also found out that one of your gigs was as a pastry chef, and had I known that, I would have said bring lots of pastries because there's no meat in pastries.
That is true.
All over that shit.
All right, well, next time we'll do that.
Yeah, without further ado, Chef Laura Romito.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. This is such a fun setup. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. Before I went to culinary school, I was a high school teacher. I taught high school English and drama for 7 years, and then decided, I guess sort of on a whim, to take a 2-year sabbatical and go to culinary school, and ended up never going back to teaching. So I've done a lot of different things. I've worked in restaurants. I have been a caterer. I worked for Holiday Market in Orlando for 10 years and started their catering business and their cooking school and their product promotion department. Went from there to a little short pastry chef gig. I had a culinary tour business where I took people all over from the suburbs into Detroit to show them cool little food businesses that were popping up. And this was like 2008, 2009. So I'm sure you remember things were crashing everywhere, but all these cool little food venues were popping up in the city. So we took a lot of people there. And then for the last 6 years, just until about a year ago this month, I was the executive chef for the National Shrine Basilica in Royal Oak. So I was a chef for priests and parish events and all kinds of different stuff. It was the most fun, easiest food job that I've ever had. Nobody sent anything back, nobody complained, had pretty good budget, so it was great. And then I launched my own company in 2016. My company's called Food Geek Foods, but I make a product line called High Five Salts. They're High Five Salts with benefits, and the reason they're called High Five is because they are based on the 5 tastes of your tongue. So instead of a flavored seasoning blend that you would see normally at a grocery store that's specifically for fish, or that is a Mediterranean flavor, these work with your taste buds instead. So they are all blends of salt, sweet, tart, bitter, and umami. We call it savory, just to make it a little less complicated. And you can use them in place of salt in anything that you make. And you get a lot more flavor, lower sodium. They're all vegan, they're gluten-free, no chemicals, organic spices. Really easy to use. I always say they play nice with everyone. So if you have other herbs and spices in your recipe, you still use those. This just replaces your salt. They have about 300 milligrams less sodium than regular salt per serving, and you use about half as much. So they're very useful. One is a fine sea salt. That's our original unmooring salt that's blended with fresh organic garlic and organic lemon juice. It has actual fresh garlic, actual lemon juice in the salt. So we dry them before we package them, but it adds a really nice flavor when we cook with them. This is our Power Lifter. It's a coarse salt with fresh garlic and balsamic vinegar. This one has a lot more pepper in it. It's bolder, it's stronger, it's crunchier, so I like it on stronger tasting foods, but you can really put it's also really good in eggs. But this one is my no salt. This is heat, sweet, tart, and bitter. So it's the other things your tongue tastes without the salt. Have you ever made anything and thought, oh, it's missing something? It needs something, but I don't add more salt to it? This is a chef trick. It actually will fix it. That little bit of heat is not for flavor, it is a stimulant. So it actually wakes up the surface of your tongue and makes the taste buds work better, so your food tastes better. So I've kind of reverse engineered the idea of seasoning your food. So they're all, again, vegan, gluten-free, no chemicals, blah, blah, blah. So that's what I cook with. It's the only thing I use. I don't even have regular salt anymore.
And not to interrupt you, but those have been available at the Eastern Market farm stand as well.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Shout out to Eastern Market.
The Eastern Market is amazing. I'm licensed out of the Shed 5 kitchen at Eastern Market along with about 15 other food entrepreneurs, and we create product there. A lot of them still make product there, sell product from there. I just use it as a research and development kitchen now, but Eastern Market has been phenomenally supportive, so I'm really grateful. So let's go ahead and jump to the recipe. So what we're going to do today is one of my favorite recipes, and when Todd and I were talking, he said you're doing a sustainability week, and you're talking about Maybe a lower carbon footprint and taking meat out of your diet will help with that. So these dishes that I'm making today are vegan. You could make them vegetarian if you wanted to, but they're really easy to make vegan, so there's really no reason to do that. They're easy to make, and my favorite thing is that they can be used in a lot of different ways. So if you make one batch, let's say of the lentils that I'm going to make, you can add different spices to it and different flavorings to it and turn it into a whole array of different dishes, so you won't even realize that you're eating the same thing over again. So you make one batch that's neutral in flavor, and then you can add all different ingredients to it to make it taste different ways. You can also add extra liquid to it and turn it into a soup if you want to. So lots of different options. Also, I use brown rice and lentils, which creates a complete protein. You get all the amino acids necessary for complete protein when you use both the lentils and the brown rice together. So especially for vegans or vegetarians, this is a nice way to make sure you're getting enough protein, but plant-based. So I'm going to show you first, I've got it all made and ready to go, so I will be feeding this to you shortly because it takes a little bit of time. But I'm just going to start with showing you how to do the lentils. So I'm using organic black lentils. These are also called Beluga lentils because they look like Beluga caviar. So they're shiny and they're pretty, like regular green lentils I think don't always stay looking all that attractive. They get a little kind of dingy looking. So I like these better just because of the presentation. So I'm going to turn on the pot here. And it's really important to think about each step in your cooking and in your seasoning. And so even with your equipment, can you tell this is my favorite popcorn cup? It's so well seasoned. But it's important to let your pot heat up before you put things in it. And one of the little tricks I like to tell people too, if you don't want to saute vegetables, if you'd rather roast them in the oven, you put your sheet pan that you're going to roast them on in the oven when you turn it on and get it hot. Just empty, clean, plain by itself. And then be careful when you take it out because sometimes you'll forget that you did that. And when you take it out, it'll be all hot and ready to go. You would never put the vegetables into this pan and then put them onto the burner. But we put food onto a cold pan all the time and put it into the oven. So this speeds up your cooking. It creates a better browning on the bottom. It'll crisp better, and it will cook faster. So it won't stick as much either. So all of that little story was just so I could wait for my pot to heat. So this is where we take questions. All right, so normally you're not going to eat these, so I just wanted to keep them in a little bag. But you want to rinse these really, really well. Any kind of lentil that you're using, make sure you put it in a colander or a strainer, spray them off really well, and kind of sift through them because they can have little rocks in them. And there's nothing quite as unappealing as biting into a rock when you're eating your food. So we try to avoid that. So one of the other things I wanted to do too, if you look at your recipe, the method that I gave you is the method that I use when I'm going to make this into a soup. When I'm going to serve the lentils and the vegetables together just like as a side dish or even as a main dish, I'm going to cook the vegetables separately. So I'll show you how to do both. You can follow that, and then at the end, add a little extra liquid. Does anyone have an immersion blender? Do you have a stick blender at home? Those are the greatest tool. They're so useful. So you can take one of those and just put it in the pot, zap it up. We call it ugly soup. It's not as pretty when it's all pureed together. But the beauty of it is if you have picky eaters in your family and you can't get them to eat vegetables, you can hide anything in there. So you can use any vegetables, anything you have left in the fridge. I use carrots, onions, celery, peppers, mushrooms, spinach. Celery root is great. Zucchini, squash, anything you like or even don't think you like, you can throw it all in there. Give it a little whiz with the blender and you're good to go. So you can tell your pot is hot enough. If you're wearing gloves, you can tell because they stick to your skin. But if you put your hand over the pot and you can't hold it there for 5 seconds, then you know it's hot enough. I hope I don't set up any sprinklers. That would make for some interesting video, wouldn't it? So when I cook over high heat, we all hear about how wonderful extra virgin olive oil is. And it's good for you, it's delicious, it has a lot of beautiful properties. It's not good to saute with. It has wonderful little particles in it that add flavor, and it has chlorophyll and all these good things that are healthy and add a nice taste to it, but they also get bitter over high heat. So save your extra virgin olive oil for dressings, for low heat cooking, for drizzling, for dipping, things like that. You all notice probably when you buy extra virgin olive oil, it says cold pressed on the bottle. So that's telling you it's never been heated, and that's a good thing. So its qualities haven't been diminished at all. If you put it over high heat, you ruin a lot of those qualities, and you can risk a very bitter tasting dish. So I use pure olive oil. This has already been filtered, and it's a lot easier. It has a higher smoke point than extra virgin does. All right, so all I'm gonna put in here right now is my mirepoix, my onions, carrots, and celery. The other cool thing about this dish is you really don't have to measure. You can if you want to, but don't not make it because you don't have a quarter cup of celery, okay? Make it anyway. So I'm just putting onions, carrots, and celery in first. I'm gonna saute these until they get nice and sweet and tender, a little golden brown. I also make a chili called Eat the Rainbow Chili, and it has all these vegetables in it too. Next time you make chili, just throw all the stuff in there too, because it's good, it's gonna taste like chili no matter what you do. Chili powder is strong and flavorful, so you can add more nutrients just by doing that. My spatula. Do I have anybody with allergies today? Any food allergies? Yay! That never happens. You should hear, and I'm definitely sympathetic, but you should hear the stuff that people are allergic to. Sometimes I think it's just like mental allergies, emotional allergies that people have. Like they don't like the texture of mushrooms, so they say they're allergic to them.
It'd be a hell of a time to find out, right?
Well, that's so true.
One
of the things I was talking to in my class this morning at Eastern Market was that you got to get a tough skin when you have a booth at Eastern Market, because people will come up to you and say all kinds of things. And sometimes they'll take a bite of something, then ask what's in it, and then say they're allergic to it. So I find there's really nothing you can do except apologize, but it happens. So, okay, so I'm going to season this. As you go along with your cooking, you want to season every step of the way. That doesn't mean you're going to add so much that it's going to be salty at the end, but every layer deserves to be seasoned, okay? So you want every little piece and particle to taste good. So I don't season by measuring, I season by surface area. It's a really useful technique to learn, and it can make you've all seen that season to taste, right, on a recipe? What does that mean? You know, that could be my taste, it could be your taste. It's confusing. That's not a helpful statement. So what I've taught people to do is the surface area of your food, and I'm sorry, we have a great setup here, but no mirror. So if you can see in my little pot here, just imagine, close your eyes. You would see that the vegetables are kind of spread out in a nice even layer. And if you want to ensure browning and getting color and caramelization on your vegetables, don't overcrowd your pan. That's very, very important. If you have too much in there, it's going to steam instead of brown, and you're never going to get that nice color, okay? So then what I'm going to do is take my seasoning, and I don't keep it in shakers, I keep it in dishes on the counter. If you put it in a shaker, you're bound to use way too much. You have much less control. So chefs don't season with salt shakers in the kitchen, right? We use our hands. So depending on who the chef is, that can be disturbing, but I'm very careful, so you're safe. So from up high, and this is not a chef show-off thing, you do this because you get even coverage. And it's just a little bit on the surface area, and that's it. So I'm going to show you while some other things are happening while you're eating. I'll give you another visual aid of how to do this. But we start with just that much, just a little bit. That was probably maybe a half a teaspoon. So I'm going to move this around a little bit, make sure everything gets a nice color to it. And then we're going to pretend that we washed these lentils. Again, you're not going to eat these, so don't worry. And we are going to put the lentils in along with the mirepoix. So what does that do? It coats them with a little bit of olive oil. We're going to season them as well. And it actually toasts them a little bit. So they have a nice, rich, nutty flavor to them. You can do this with rice. You can do it with green lentils. Be careful if you do it with red lentils because they're so tiny and thin and they cook really fast anyway. They can get kind of mushy. But this is just like, have you ever made risotto? And so when you make risotto, you saute your onion in your butter and then you add your rice. And you coat the little grains of rice with that butter. And you also toast them so it's more flavorful. Good cooking is not rocket science, but it takes effort. It takes a little time, it takes a little thought. And the more little tiny steps like that you can add, the better your food's going to taste. So you want to be building flavors all the time. So could I just throw in a bunch of water, bring it to a boil, throw my lentils in here. That's what the package says to do. Yes, you could do that. They'd be fine. These will be better. So why not make it better, right?
Yeah.
All right, so can you hear that nice sizzle? I'm risking my skin for you people. All right, so there we go. Now, in a large, a full batch of this, you want to do that for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half, not very long. And then, don't worry, I'm going to take the water I did not drink out of. Again, you're not going to eat these. And we're just going to cover these with water. Oh, you know what? Bad. Try to season them. Trouble. All right. Again, we added a new ingredient. Took up more surface area, so we have to season. Just pretend I did that in the right order, okay? It's been a long day. All right. So now, we'll go ahead and add the water in the right order. And you're going to hear it get quiet. So that's something that I talk about a lot when I teach cooking. We don't think about hearing as a sense that we use when we cook. You smell things, right? You can smell when something's burning, that's for sure. But think about the sound the food makes. Because when you first throw a bunch of vegetables into a nice hot pan, you get that beautiful sizzly sound, that nice and bright, and it's sharp and crackly and everything. After 2 or 3 minutes, it's going to get quieter. Because the cells of the food start to break down, they release water, and it cools off the surface of the pan. So it gets quiet. And then when it starts to get loud again, that's when the water has cooked off, and they're starting to brown. So listen to it. I know there's other things to do in the kitchen other than listen to your food, but try it. It eventually becomes second nature, and it's a really helpful technique. Okay, so we're going to just bring this all the way up to a boil. Then we're going to lower it to the lowest simmer, cover it tightly. Has anybody ever seen this little trick? So take a wine cork, soak it in water.
The best idea.
For nice hot water for about 10 minutes. Just slide it in here and it swells up, and then you can pick up your pot pan. Isn't that fun? No, I'm ready to pull up. I better stop telling everybody everything though. I'm not going to have anything left or right. All right, so I imagine from television we already have these lentils done. So I'm going to turn this off and just kind of slide it out of the way here. How am I going to do that? No, I'm just going to leave it where it is. And we'll move over here. Okay, so next step. Oh, I do have to move this. Okay, so I have to use this burner again. So all we're going to do here is separately saute these vegetables. And the reason that I wanted to show you this, because I'm sure if you're here for a cooking class on a Thursday afternoon, you probably like to cook, right? So you probably already know a lot of this stuff. But I'm going to saute these vegetables in this pan. I use nonstick pans, but I keep track of them very carefully. The minute they scratch or they have like a gouge in them of any kind, you need to get rid of them. It's not safe to cook with them. They release toxins into your food. You can recycle these. So I live in Royal Oak, so I have access to the Oakland County Recycling Center, and they do take skillets and things like that to be recycled. But just be very, very careful. I know there's those non-stick pans that have like no coating on them and stuff. I just don't think they work very well. So the other thing that's important is that you don't let this get to a high smoking point. You don't want the surface of this pan smoking. So again, we're going to be careful about how much we put in here. You don't want a whole lot in here. So when you're sauteing your vegetables, you want to think about it. So I have onions, zucchini, mushrooms, spinach, and red peppers here. You could use anything you like. If you don't like mushrooms, leave them out. If you want to add, I don't know, some yellow squash, add that. Different kinds of peppers. It's really entirely up to you. So have fun with it. Play with it a little bit. And then I'm just going to let this get hot enough, and I'll start with my onions and my mushrooms because those take more time to cook. The zucchini and the peppers and the spinach cook almost instantly. So we'll just throw those in at the last minute, and I am going to go ahead and add all of these delicious vegetables into the pot that I already have going here. So we'll have even more to do. I also seasoned these with the Power Lifter salt. Okay. So we'll put a little oil in. Don't be afraid to use a little olive oil. There's nothing wrong with it. It's good for you. I'm going to swirl it around a little bit. So you can tell your oil is ready to add food to it when it's nice and thin, and it moves quickly across your pan. If it's still thick and sort of sitting there, then it's too cold still, and your food's going to absorb more oil if you put it in before the oil is hot enough. So just make sure it's nice and warm. So we're going to start with our little bit of onion. You can use any kind of onion. I love red onion. Plus I think it's pretty, and it adds a nice color to a dish. Oh, I happen to have some onions and carrots and celery left from over here. If a piece of spinach gets in there, don't worry about it. Again, not rocket science. When I was in graduate school at U of M, I have a couple degrees I don't use anymore. I was watching cooking shows all the time. I should have realized then, maybe stop going to grad school and go to culinary school instead, but oh well, it took a while for me to figure that out. And I watched this wonderful woman, her name was Biba Caggiano, and she was adorable. She was this older Italian woman, and she was directly, did anybody remember her?
Yep.
She was so cute, and she just loved food, but she made it not scary. She would say, if you make a mistake, just do it again. You know, it's just food, especially making pasta and things like that. So that's always sort of been my mantra. Don't be afraid of it, but learn some things, try to use the right kind of technique. I'm going to do the same thing here. Spread this out, so I've got my surface area, and I'm going to season the surface area. I'm not worrying about measuring, and I rarely really screw up the seasoning. Once in a while I'll do it, but not very often. Now the other thing you see here is that I'm not messing with this. I'm not stirring it. I'm not picking at it. I'm not using a spoon to move it around. The more you play with this food that's in the pan, the less likely you're going to get nice, good color on it. It's going to cook unevenly. So just let it sit there. Let it do its thing. Let it stay in contact with the surface of the pan. And then once you look at it, you can see around the edges, it's starting to brown. Okay, then I'm going to give it a little shake and a little flip. And when you want to learn how to do this, if you don't already know, get some dried beans. They're exactly the right weight to practice with. And a small pan. This is too big. Get just a little tiny saute pan and then go outside. Do it in your driveway, because that's the best way to learn, when you're not worried about messing up your kitchen. Okay, but it's really not hard. It's a push and pull. It's a push and then pull. It's a very small movement, and you do have to actually tip the pan a little bit.
John can do it.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and just add the rest of this, because I can, and it's time, and then we're going to put it all in the beautiful pot over here. You can see too, this is important, that I cut the zucchini bigger than the others, because zucchini is so soft and has such a high water content that it's going to get soft and mushy if I cut it in little tiny pieces. So when you're cutting up your vegetables, think about their texture, because they're all different, right? So carrots, little, because they're hard. And if you want it all to cook at the same time, think about how dense the vegetable is and cut it relative to how long you want it to be in the pan. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so we've got all this. Gosh, isn't that just so pretty? Yay, vegetables. Okay, and I'm going to do a little more. Okay. That's good. I'm going to get a little toss. So this is another cool thing. I know I make kind of a mess on here, sorry. This is another cool thing you can do right now at this point. If you wanted to, you've sauteed these vegetables. Crack 6 eggs into a bowl, whisk them up really, really well, add a little seasoning, maybe a little cream, pour it right over the top, throw it in the oven, about 10-15 minutes at about 325 degrees. You have a beautiful frittata. So if you want an additional type of protein, so frittata is just a quiche without the crust. And Italian cooks are okay with a little brown on the eggs. If you're French and you make an omelet and there's any brown on the eggs, you get flogged or something. That's very bad. So you always want to be careful of that. The Italians don't have that problem. So this is about all the more time this is going to take. It's really fast. So one of the things I like to suggest to people, especially if you're trying to add more vegetables into your diet, you're trying to go to a less meat-based diet, is on a day off, be it a Sunday or whatever day you happen to have off, buy a cucumber, a couple of peppers, some mushrooms, some carrots, any vegetables that you like, peppers. Take a cookie sheet and line it with paper towel. You know, the one with the little rim on them, not the flat ones. And line it with paper towel. And then wash your vegetables, dice them all up, and line them up in little rows on your sheet tray. And then you just cover it with more paper towels. Don't wrap it in plastic wrap. And just put it in your refrigerator. It'll last for 5 or 6 days. And then you can pull out the veggies, throw some in a salad, throw some in a stir fry. You can have them to use all week long. It is so easy. But the trick is, do not wrap it in plastic wrap because it traps the moisture and they're going to get soggy and probably moldy. Yeah?
Did you say you wet the paper towel?
Nope.
No.
Just dry paper towel. Yep. And several layers. So put like 3 or 4 paper towels. You know, make it thicker because they will leach moisture. As soon as you cut into them, they start to, the cells break, so they start to leach moisture. But that paper towel layer on the bottom will absorb the extra moisture. And covering it with paper towel, it's the most convenient thing. You're going to you'll love it. I love it when I do it. I'm really happy that I have it. It's very convenient. All right, see how we got nice color on these? Also, the handles or the handles of my burner fell off. So that's comforting. There we go. All is well. All right, I always tell people it is mean to feed people something you haven't tasted first, or if you didn't do it right. I'm going to taste this and see where we landed. It's so good. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and put these yummy vegetables right in here. And we'll stir those up. I hope I don't permanently make a bad mark on your table. Sorry.
They're not the greatest tables in the first place.
I know. It'll be all right. So look at that. We've got this gorgeous vegetables, and we've got our lentils and our brown rice. It smells amazing. And so at this point, because my seasonings are so neutral in flavor, you could add, one of my favorite things to do is add ginger and curry powder to this. It is outstanding. If you are doing meat or fish, like a piece of salmon with this is amazing. You don't need it, but it's an option. So you can also add salsa and cumin. That's really a good combination. If you have basil pesto, you can also add pesto to it. So you can literally take this and flavor it any way that you want to, because you've already focused on the 5 tastes of your tongue: the salt, the sweet, the tart, the bitter, the savory. Those are already in here, so it's going to taste good. But if you wanted to modify the flavor, you can. So, and again, like I said, you can make big batches of this and freeze it. It freezes great. If you don't want to freeze the vegetables, if you still want like a more of a texture to the vegetables, then just make the lentils, the brown rice, and freeze that in batches, and then you can always add vegetables to it later. So take it out, you can throw it in a pan on the stove, add a little water, it comes right back to life. So it's really useful stuff. If you want to, also you can add quinoa to this. If you want to add an additional grain, quinoa is very high in nutrients. You just have to cook it separately. So I have this here because I use this Trader Joe's organic frozen brown rice. Lots of people tell me they don't like cooking rice, or it's hard to cook rice, or they mess up rice, or it's not a texture they like. If you're good at rice, good for you. Make your own rice. If you're not, buy this stuff. And then you don't have to throw it in the microwave. You just take it out of the little pouches and just add it to the lentils while you're cooking. So it's a nice addition. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to show you one more thing, and then there'll be food. Okay, so I wanted another little thing to show you to do today, something a little fun. Some of you have already said you do this all the time, so that's awesome. But I just wanted to show you what to do with a spaghetti squash. Because spaghetti squash can be a little intimidating.
Me too. I might do it.
Let me clean up my area here. I don't like being messy. Always clean as you go. So this is a spaghetti squash. They're hard. You can poke them a couple times with the tip of a knife and put them in the microwave for about a minute, and they soften. So the skin is, or the shell is soft enough that when you cut through it, you don't feel scared. Okay? So one thing that's important though is that you use a large enough knife. Don't be scared of this. You need a good sized knife. If you try to do this with a little knife, you're going to end up hurting yourself. And you also have to make sure your knife is really sharp. So a sharp knife is obviously easier to cut things with, but if you're using a dull knife, you end up pushing harder. And if you do make a mistake, you're going to hurt yourself more with a dull knife than you do with a sharp knife. And not to gross you out or anything, but a sharp knife makes a nice clean cut in the skin, so it heals better. So, and this is the reality of my life. So So I do have to think about these things. But when I was in culinary school, I had a friend who dried his knife like this and went right through the center of his hand and was out for like 6 weeks. So please don't ever do that. Just be really, really careful. These also never go in the dishwasher. And if you're going to spend money on a piece of culinary equipment, make it a really good knife because it will last forever. You don't need to get them sharpened off, and you can get a steel, which is actually just realigns the blade of the knife. So when you cut with a knife, it starts out pointy, right? And the more you use it, the edge does that. So instead of this, it's frayed like that. So what a steel does when you run the steel along the edge is it pulls off the little broken metal shards and it realigns the blade for you again. So it doesn't take as much off the knife as actually sharpening it does. I'm not a fan of those little sharpening machines. Williams-Sonoma sharpens knives. I think it's like $5 or something, and you can bring in a bunch of knives and they sharpen them all for you. So it's a good thing to do. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this little spaghetti squash and we're going to cut the one end off. Just kind of start in there and then turn it around, and we'll cut the other end off. And then we're going to stand it up. Now, every time you cut it, now I washed this, but every time you got to think about washing the outside of your vegetables. How many people picked this thing up before they decided this was not the one for them, right? And how many times did it fall on the floor and in the back room? Have you ever seen the back room in a grocery store? So this is not necessarily clean on the outside, so you want to clean it off. But then I've now cut through it, and I'm going to wipe off my knife so that I'm not pushing any bacteria all the way through the center of this, okay? Especially true with onions. The root end is often very, very dirty. So now just very carefully, we're going to go straight down and just kind of wiggle. You don't want to just try to lay on it, just be patient. Go back and forth. And I like to quarter them, but you can also just have them. And it just occurred to me, I don't think I brought my other spoons when I try to do this with this. So you're just going to take these seeds out, just like a pumpkin. Okay? Oh, this works. Okay. You can take these little seeds and roast them too, and they make a really nice garnish. They're crunchy if you have the time, or you can make a kid do it. Although I have 2 teenage boys, and their whole lives they thought it was gross. You're gross. Why do you think this is gross? They were always gross. But they didn't like that. I always had to do the pumpkin seeds all by myself. But then I didn't let them eat them. If you don't help pick out the seeds, you don't get to eat them. Halloween's really fun at my house. we give out like pencils. Can't have the pumpkin seeds. Oh, jeez. All right. So that's all you have to do. Oops. Sorry.
Alright, are we assuming that you already cooked it in the microwave for a minute?
Yeah, I did. This one, it was pretty soft. But yeah, just throw it, and make sure you poke it a couple times.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, explode. It won't in a minute, but if you left it in there for too long, it could. So you just want to make sure you release the pressure. All right, so then all we're gonna do with this is a little olive oil on the inside, season it, and I used my original unmooring salt on this one, but I'm just gonna use this as a demonstration so you can see. So again, up high. Because this is thick, remember we're talking surface area, right? So I've got it on the surface area, but remember that this is thick too, and I can't get to the other side because it's still in the shell. So we may end up having to add more seasoning to this when we put it in the pan in a little bit. But that's really all you need to do. Olive oil like this. And then I started flesh side down. Remember I talked to you about the cookie sheet? Put your sheet pan in the oven while you're cutting up your squash. Get it turned on, get it nice and hot. Pull up that hot pan. I like to use parchment paper, it just makes things easier to clean. And then, or you don't have to. Flip this down, flesh side down, roast it for about 20 minutes, 425 degrees. Everybody's oven is different, so I always hesitate to give times and temperatures because no one's oven is the same, but approximately that much. And then last 5 or 10 minutes, turn it over so that the underneath side is also in contact with that hot pan, and you make sure that it roasts all the way through. Actually, that also helps it to release from the skin when you want to scrape it out. So if you never turn it over, sometimes that flesh will stick to this stuff because it gets a little crispy while it's in the oven. Okay, so that's that. And now you have this beautiful roasted spaghetti squash. And this is what it looks like when it comes out. I'm going to change my gloves because I was working with the raw stuff. And now my hands are all sticky. See how well this goes? My husband and I were talking the other day, you know, we try not to eat at fast food places, but once in a while, when we're on the road or something, we'll do a Subway stop. And at least I convinced myself that the vegetables there are better than somewhere else that I could stop. But I just feel so bad for the Subway people because of those stupid gloves they have to use.
Yeah.
Don't you think that Subway would be so much more efficient if they had better fitting gloves?
Yeah.
They have hamburger helper gloves. Like the glove sticks way up and they can't peel the cheese or do anything. So you can tell I used to teach high school, right? I do all kinds of stuff to keep people's attention. All right, well, this is not helping at all. That's lovely. Okay, so this is what it looks like when it comes out. And I quartered these and I have smaller ones, but see the skin is a little caramelized. That's the inside. And then all you're gonna do is just pull it right out. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So we were talking about this earlier. I like pasta. To me, this is not a substitute for pasta. This is a different side dish. It's delicious. You know, people who like squash love this. But you can use it just like pasta. Don't expect it to taste like pasta. It doesn't. It tastes like squash. That's what it's supposed to taste like. Okay? And then before you saute it, because at this point you can do anything. You can put this in the fridge. You can freeze it, but you're going to lose some texture. So I don't usually recommend that. But just kind of pull it apart. But it does have the texture of pasta. And it's better for you. So we're going to use this
Probably be really good.
as a base for the lentils. But what you could do is just a nice fresh tomatoes, little onions, some fresh basil, and saute this with it. That's really, really good. If you have a favorite tomato sauce, you can put that on it. You can use a little tomato sauce and a little cream and maybe a little vodka. So one of the things I teach people is think about all those 5 tastes of your tongue when you're cooking. So the spaghetti squash is sweet, right? So in order to really bring out the best of this, we're not going to add a sweet sauce to it. We're going to add something else to balance it. So something with some acidity, some tartness, okay? Something with a little bit of bitterness. So you could use Brussels sprouts with this, and then a little bit of a splash of white wine. And that would be good, because you get your acid and your bitter. And this is sweet and savory. You should throw some garlic, some onion in there, and you're good to go. So cooking doesn't have to be complicated if you're just thinking about those 5 things, right? Just think about those 5 things. Sweet potatoes with marshmallows on them? Come on. That's sweet on sweet on sweet on sweet, right? So sweet potatoes I love them with balsamic vinegar on them, and it's because that's acidic. You can roast them alongside some Brussels sprouts and put those together. So think about adding different types of taste to them rather than the more additional of the same, okay? All right, so now all we're gonna do with this is saute it, and then you can eat it. Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
All right, so while we do that, does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Did you roast them the same amount of time on both sides?
No, I do about 3/4 of the way facing down, and the last quarter I flip them up. And the reason I say 3/4 versus times is because these were small. So these only took about 15 minutes facing down, and then about 5 to 10 minutes facing up. So it just depends. You've seen those really big ones. Those can take half hour, 45 minutes. And in that instance, you might even want to quarter them instead of just cutting them in half. Smaller pieces cook faster. So just kind of think about that. But the beauty of this is you can do it in advance. You can do this a couple days in advance and then just throw it into the pan at the last minute. It's really convenient. Okay, this is also really good with pesto, with basil pesto. My towels are a little sad. Professional towels are sad. Okay, so as soon as this pan gets hot, I'm just gonna throw them in here. And then I will serve some spaghetti squash as the bed, and we'll put the lentils on the top.
Oh, that's a great idea.
That sound good?
Yeah.
Oops, there we go.
Right.
And down. I
Yes.
love this
So
pan.
healthy.
Someone gave this to me as a gift. It's a California pan. I teach cooking at Williams-Sonoma, and I have for years. And they have so many cool things there, but they have so many silly things that you just really don't need. Like they have pre-measured salt tablets for your pasta water.
Oh my goodness.
I have a friend who works there, she like tries to sell those to people. That's just because she wants to see if she can do it.
Yeah.
Come on. Okay, so my last little trick and tip here, and actually if you want to saute this with onion, it's really good. I put my olive oil right on my vegetables often, rather than in the pan. So I can get the pan a little hotter,
I know.
and I don't ever burn the oil.
Yeah.
Okay.
So smart.
So it just makes it safer. You don't ever want to put oil into a hot pan and have it catch on fire. And that's the reality, you know, it can do that. So just be careful. Yeah, another little side tip. If you're ever cooking with like a liqueur or with rum or with cognac or something like that, turn the burner off underneath your pan while you're adding the liquor to the pan. Because if that flame hops right up, it can jump back into the bottle and it can explode. So you turn the burner off, move the pan away, pour in the liquor, and then put it back on the burner. Okay? See, look how much safer you're all going to be today.
Wow. Oh man.
Todd wanted this to be sustainability and food safety class, right?
That's right.
All right, so we're going in. Oh, just what we wanted to hear. I was talking to my husband the other day. I said, yeah, I think I'm going to make squash for that demo. I said, I wish I liked squash more. He said, yeah, I do. I wish you did too, because then I'd get it more. When I was cooking for the priests, I would always make stuff for them that I wouldn't normally necessarily eat, so I never made it at home. Sometimes I'd shop for them and we'd have, you know, I'd pick up my kids in the car and they go, is that priest food or our food? It was usually priest food. They have a better budget than I do. All right, because, what was I saying? Hold on. Oh, yes, okay. Because this was so thick and I could only season the one side, I'm going to add a little bit more seasoning, but not a lot. Just a little. Okay, and then with this stuff too, I'm going to add some of my fixer-upper. This is the no salt. So this has a little bit of a kick to it if you put it right on your tongue, but if you put it on your food, it doesn't have the same effect. It actually is just going to make your tongue kind of buzz a little bit, and everything you eat for the next half hour, 45 minutes is going to taste better. It's crazy how it works. So I love to record when I'm at my booth at Easter Market, and I'll have someone just put some of this on their tongue, and you'll see them going. Like they start to get this. Oh, there's the sweet. Oh wait, there's the sour. You know, it's fun to watch. So, and I just laugh. That one took me so long to make. I knew I wanted. I've been making this for 15 years. I knew I wanted a coarse salt with a lot more garlic and with more pepper. I knew I wanted I have a Himalayan pink salt blend also. It's got garlic and apple cider vinegar in it. I knew I wanted a no salt, but I could not figure out what to do with it. And everything I made looked like Mrs. Dash and tasted like Mrs. Dash. I mean, there's plenty of those. We don't need any more. So finally, and I was using all these, you know, French techniques, and I'm going to use onions and carrots and celery and dried baby and all that. And it was all just silly. So finally, one day I was in my kitchen and I thought, oh, wait a minute. What do I do when I taste something and it's flat, it's missing something, it needs something, it's not right? Heat, sweet, tart, and bitter. Those are the things that are always out of balance when you're making something. There's always going to be one taste of the tongue that is dominant, and you don't want that. You want it to be balanced. So think about those other things. Don't just go to salt. Salt is our easy go-to for seasoning, but sweet, tart, bitter, savory, those are other things that you can utilize to make your food taste better without adding more salt. Just a little trick. All right, we're almost hot here. And you can get some nice color on this too. Oh, look how pretty that is. Right? Does everybody like squash? Right, even if you don't like squash, you can try the squash. Okay. You don't have to. But we do keep track of who tries things. Todd's taking notes. Although I have no idea if he has any power over any of you at all. So.
Absolutely none.
Do any of you know my friend Stephanie Bishop? She works here. You do? Oh, yeah, she's my friend. Our kids went to school together.
Small world.
Also, my friend Amy Arbeiter, she was here until a few days ago.
Yeah.
Oh, a few days ago.
Yeah. Moving on to the big world of banking.
Oh,
She
I
has said
didn't know
it's awfully
that.
quiet there.
You know, hey.
Yeah, I was on a project with her when she left.
She's a good
A lot
egg.
louder than
Yes,
Beck.
she is.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, she's a sweetheart. All right. So we're just about good there. The nice thing about these pans too, you can kind of spread stuff out because the heat does move up the side of the pan. But one thing I want to show you that I can do it on here is when I'm sauteing something and I want color on it, I kind of open up some space in between the pieces of food, and that releases steam. And when you release steam, you get more browning. So if you have a pile of food in the middle, what's going to happen to the stuff on top? It's just going to stay, it's going to get wet, basically. It's not going to get color at all. So spread it out in some little pockets of space in between will help things brown better and cook faster. Okay, are you guys hungry?
Yes.
Yay! I'm not sure I have enough. The whole pot is full. I should have brought to-go containers. All right, I'm going to re-glove here. Well, I have to say, you're a quieter group than I had this morning. I do these food entrepreneur classes, and we had 45 people this morning, and they just did not stop talking the whole time. There were so many questions. It was fun, but sometimes it's like teaching a painting where everybody just sits there, and this group was not that way at all. I'm exhausted. Okay. And everybody wants to make their grandma's barbecue sauce or their favorite salsa because their cousin told them they should sell it. We try not to make people sad, but at the end we're like, okay, have other people taste this, people who don't like you, or people who don't know you, because just because your cousin said you should sell this does not mean that's necessarily true. Okay. When I was starting my company, I had focus groups to work on my seasoning. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go ahead and, do you guys mind coming up to get it? It'll go a lot faster that way. Or if some people want to help pass, I don't care, it's up to you. But I have a lot, so.